Hello and welcome back to Redefine Parenting. I'm your host, Venu Keller. I would like to welcome you to Spanglish World Network and her network on Zingo TV channels 250 and 251. Please remember to download both Zingo TV app on respective app stores and iOS Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire Sticks, Roku Sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. So today we are in for a treat. I have one of my dearest friends, someone who's been a mentor to me for many years, who has helped me process a lot of the emotions and feelings I've gone through in my life and helped me to basically redefine it and appreciate all the emotions that show up in my life, to knowing that they're all gifts somehow, some way. And today my guest is Deb Battersby. Deb, I am so excited to have you here. Thank you so much for coming and going to share your wisdom with us.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm real excited about what you're doing in the world, Vino. And anything I can do to support that, I'm on board.
Wonderful. So we're just going to dive in. So I brought Deb here because, being a parent of 6 kids, I can tell you the way I raise my 2 boys is definitely different from the way I'm raising my twins. And I will pat myself on the back for that because I have learned. And if I know better, I do better. But there's still times that I get triggered. And, Deb, you and I were having a conversation, and I remember even years ago, and it still comes up with, when kids behave a certain way and we want to change the kids' behavior. And you've always pointed out something interesting. It's we as parents are just as reactive, and it's our emotions as parents that, we really need to identify versus always trying to change the kids' behavior. It's really looking at what are the emotions us parents are feeling when we're in reactive mode, and you had talked about there was like a few emotions that you said that come to the top of your mind. I know one of them's frustration, because I'm willing to talk about that one.
Absolutely. Well, anybody who's been a parent knows that frustration is readily available. So, yeah.
And what are some of the other ones that you see? I mean, I probably can vouch for them, but I know you work with clients too. So what are some of the emotions that come up with some of the parents that you've worked with?
Well, impatience is one, and that's kind of a good partner to frustration. But there's a pattern, actually, that most of us aren't really conscious of, and it's actually the trigger for some of those other emotions, and that's actually a pattern of expectation. And it really kind of goes back to our own programming, how we were raised and how we were brought up and what was expected of us as children. And, as so many people from my generation came from the children are to be seen and not heard, that was still a lingering impact for, especially when I was growing up. And I come from a very big family. I'm one of 9 children, so I'm very familiar with chaos in the home life and, reactive emotional situations. And so it's fascinating because, as parents, as adults, as individuals, we have so many expectations of every single human being that we have interactions with. We even have expectations on how hospitality staff should treat us and how the wait staff in a restaurant should behave and how, the teachers at the school and the principal, we have expectations of everyone and every role. And we're not always conscious of what those expectations are. And a lot of times we are projecting those expectations onto our children without recognizing that we're doing it and not even knowing what we're expecting of them until they don't meet our expectations. Then upset, anger, frustration, disappointment, all these reactive kind of things show up. And so that's the thing I'd like to invite, us as individuals and parents to look at. What are we expecting from our children and what are we reacting to?
Well, let's just take a live scenario. So this literally happened in my home. And, I'm very vulnerable here because I think some of the things that I'm able to help people with is because I go through it, and I'm not, and I'm vulnerable enough to share it. Like, things happen, and that's how I learn. And so my daughter and we butt heads a lot. Um, surprise, surprise. She, the twins, it's like if you look at our son, he's just like my husband. If you look at my daughter, she's just like me when it comes to personality. And so imagine that I have the standard of how her room should look, and it's not. And so I have brought everything into the middle of the floor, and I'm upset because we have gone through this so many times. I have cleaned it. I have shown her exactly what I tell my clients. Show your kids what the expectation are. Don't just speak it, because your definition of a clean room is probably different from their expectation of a clean room. But if you get in there and you do it together and you take the time for them also to take pride in it and also to show them this is clean. This is the expectation, like you were just talking about. And then when it's not met, and then there's lying, right? She's lying because she wants to get out of it. She'd rather have the reward of watching TV or whatever versus taking the time to organize her room. Then I come in and I was like, oh, no, no, no. Like, this is not acceptable. And I'm taking everything out and I'm dumping it out because it's not organized. We spent $200 on these organized boxes. She's supposed to have dolls, doll clothes, everything. I'm coming in there. There's art, there's paint, there's wrappers. And I was like, oh my gosh, how long has this been going on? And it's been okay. So I was beyond frustrated. I
Mhm,
was I felt frustrated. I felt not definitely not heard by her. I
mhm,
felt betrayed because she lied
mhm,
to me.
mhm.
And she's crying. I'm crying. Like, we're all crying and upset at this point.
And so it's really fascinating because you made that behavior mean a whole lot of things.
I did.
You made that behavior mean that she was disrespectful, that she betrayed you, that that she was not meeting your expectations by telling a lie. And so, the first question that I want to ask is, honestly, what would happen if you didn't have that expectation?
Then her room would stay a mess.
Yeah, it would. And how much less drama would there be in your world?
Well, I don't know. I think that there'd be more drama because then I would feel that I'm not guiding her to create her own standards of what clean is and not. Because if we're not giving something as a comparison of what's clean versus what's dirty, how will they know? How will they
And and the interesting thing about that is when she does that, it really is about noticing what is the emotion that you feed back to her. When you feel betrayed, that is an intense emotion, right?
know?
And so her so-called misbehavior is, by not complying with what you want, has set up a feeling within you of betrayal. Do you honestly think that that child intended to betray you?
I mean, I think that she tried to be dishonest.
Yes, and you made that mean what?
Well, I think dishonesty is betray. Like, when
Yeah,
you're dishonest, like, so.
exactly. And so what you're saying is because you have rules around that, and
Mhm.
when that rule isn't met, then the emotion that comes from you is betrayal. Now, betrayal is an intense emotion. So if energetically you're in a space of betrayal, what do you think that does to the dynamic between you and Sage?
It definitely puts a lot of, there's a huge gap now.
Mhm.
She's
And
scared, she's sad, she's having her intense emotion, and that's why I bring this up, because I want the listeners to know that this is what happens and this is
yeah,
real. And, I could have all the tools in the toolbox that I have, and yet when I am with my child, I'm not a coach. I'm a mom who's going through, like, I
right.
wanna teach her, I wanna show her, And so, why I'm bringing this up for our listeners is because I want them to be able to relate, like, wow, this is happening to me. So,
Of course.
you know,
But the thing to become aware of is what it triggers within you.
right.
And the energy of betrayal is intense. And that, that obviously gives off a vibe, which sets up that fear and that separateness. And so, what would happen if that rule wasn't about betrayal? That what if that rule was about, okay, she's trying to pull a fast one, or she's trying to get something over on me, or she really thinks that she can, manipulate or control.
Mhm.
What if it was a different emotion than betrayal?
It would
And
feel lighter.
it would
Definitely feel lighter.
exactly. And so what if it was, what if you could choose in that moment curiosity over betrayal? And how would that change the dynamic for you, first of all?
So, first of all, I love that because my listeners know I always say curiosity, not critical. So, curiosity would bring me more into an inquisitive, into wonder, into it would take me out of stress and anger, and it would
Mm,
bring me maybe even into playful. Because as soon as you said, like, oh, she pulled a fast one on me, oh, she's being a little cheeky,
yeah,
it would have been a different feeling in that room, probably not so intense. I probably wouldn't have went to intense.
right. Exactly, exactly. And what I'm saying is whatever we're reacting to is because there's an expectation or a rule that we have that we don't even know we have, that we're reacting to in a way that, like you said, produces anger.
Mhm.
And that feeling of betrayal and that feeling of so when you feel angry and you feel like you've been betrayed, what does that mean? What does that mean about your relationship with your daughter?
Mm,
So these are things that are going on a subconscious level that you're not processing,
I'm
but
not. I
but
didn't
your
think about it.
but your body is processing all of it, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah,
so if there was a different perspective, a change in a rule that allowed you to come to a space of being inquisitive or curious or playful, would that change the dynamic of the interaction?
100%.
Exactly. And so the reason that I'm just bringing this up is because most of our reactive responses, we don't plan those things. We don't even know that we're being triggered by it. And we don't really know the meaning we're attaching to it unless we start to have this kind of conversation.
Right. This
Yeah.
is so beautiful, and I'm sure there's many listeners all over the world right now that's listening to this that's really going, "Oh my gosh, that's me," because I'm sure I mean, you're a mom. I'm sure you've gone
Yeah.
through this going, "Okay, that's me.
Oh
I've
my
done."
God. So many times, thank God my children are grown and, and they don't have to. Although even with grown children, you can be highly reactive, I assure you. So,
Got that too. I got that too. So I'm curious, and this is all great, and you're absolutely right. I when I go back and you take me to that moment, and if I even ask myself if I was going to make this a lighter situation or if I was going to bring fun into it, what thought would I have to have? What feeling would I have to have? And immediately my mind would say curiosity.
exactly. And the whole thing is, Vina, is that you identified that it was attached to a rule that you have about the way that your daughter should communicate with you, and that lying is the ultimate betrayal.
And because honesty is my top value.
Mhm. And yet, could you teach honesty without throwing in the whole idea, the concept of betrayal?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And so that sense of betrayal goes back to an old pattern of your own, an old wound that's so, deep subconsciously, you don't know why you're reacting to this. And and so as parents, half the time we're reacting to our own wounds and our own judgments from childhood. And How many times have you heard a parent say that, "Oh, my mom and dad this and did this, and I'll never do that. I'll never be that way," only to find yourself
being that way.
repeating the
Mhm.
same strategies and the same behaviors. So the reality is, we have to be gentle with ourselves, that these, our reactions are actually emotional programs, and
Mm,
that if we can just be present for the moment and just ask ourselves what's really going on here. And, what's really going on is, I feel hurt, or I feel disappointed, or maybe I feel like I'm failing my child as a mom. What's really going on here? So if we can be present with ourselves enough to just ask that question, we can get more honest with our own feelings, and then start to ask, okay, what are my rules around that?
right. And I
And
think this is so, so important because, you know, um, this happens all the time when, especially I see it with the child parent relationship. And what's interesting is because my whole show, this is all about, I bring people like you and other people on so we can help give kids a childhood they won't have to heal from. And if us parents can do better and we can recognize that, okay, I'm having this emotion right now, what are the rules around it? And if I was going to bring curiosity into it, if I was going to bring fun into it, how would that change the dynamics of the communication in that moment? How could I teach her honesty without the intense negative feeling of betrayal attached to it? Where
mhm,
now honesty is attached to devastation versus that I was just trying to get away with it, mom. I just wanted to watch TV, you know, and I made it something different. So, and again, for my listeners out there, I just want you to know I'm being vulnerable because I want you to know that we all go through this, that
absolutely.
there is not one of us on this earth that can say, I am the perfect parent, because there's no such thing. We're all
Yeah.
here growing together. We're all here learning different opportunities, different strategies. And that's why I brought you, Deb, because to me, you are a master at helping us figure out the emotions that run through our body, where we feel them, how we feel them, what's the gift that we feel. A lot of us grow up to say, hey, I'm a mom. I can't feel sad in front of you. I can't feel mad in front of you. I can't feel disappointed in front of you. Like, I am not allowed to have any of these quote unquote negative emotions. I didn't even realize that there's no such thing as a negative emotion. We feel something, it has a meaning to it, and it has a gift and a lesson of why it comes to serve us. And so that just brings me to another point, because I really want to brag about you for a second, Deb. Um, when you created, which is now called the Freedom Point, when I learned it was the emotional matrix, and the creation of helping people get out of physical ailment that is attached to the emotions that we have carried, plus the rules that
Yeah,
keep them there and keep them
yeah.
closed, plus the definitions of what's bad and what's good. And you've really been able to create a process of helping people in all aspects understand that our emotions are here to serve us. And what I love about your work is that I use it with the kids I coach, I use it with the families I coach, because doing what you just did with me, that did not take long at all, is such a gift to give to people. Because what I have seen, and I'm sure you can concur, is that a lot of people like to stay in certain emotions.
Mhm.
They get a lot of worth and significance, certainty out of it, and they
Well,
don't know how to be outside of it.
the reality is most of the emotions that we retreat to as our kind of our go-to, we do that because they work.
Mhm.
We do that because those patterns have helped us get certain results throughout our lives. So they become like automatic go-tos on a subconscious level. And so even the frustration has an upside to it. It has an energy and an intensity to it. And oftentimes, frustration gives you the power to confront something that you might not otherwise confront. Anger has a similar kind of power behind it. In fact, anger is one of the most powerful energetic resources you can call on, because when you get really mad about something, you've got a fire in you to do something about it. And so often, it's an easy retreat to anger,
Mhm.
to get an outcome. And we've learned this throughout our lives. So there's always an upside to it. But there is a downside to anger because it is intense. Number one, it's actually intense for the person experiencing it because it releases a lot of stress chemicals in the body.
Mhm.
It also can be very damaging to relationships, and it can actually be even damaging to your own sense of self. The belief that, what, I can't control my anger, or my anger gets out of control and other people get hurt. So, the things that we sometimes call negative emotions have a lot of power behind them.
Right.
And so it becomes instinctive, intuitive, especially if you've got a child who seems to be running the show in the moment, and all of a sudden you want enough energy to overpower that
Oh.
dynamic. Anger comes in a heartbeat, and you go, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. Now let's talk about who's in charge here. So then,
Mm.
that anger comes as a powerful force for domination. I'm in charge, back off. And so that's why it's so easy to resort to anger.
That is very powerful because when you said that, that fully landed on me. When am I exerting my anger the most? It's when I feel powerless. I did
Exactly.
not even think about that. I did not even think about that until you just said that.
And you know what? How many times as a parent do we feel powerless? Something's going on with our kids that we don't understand, or we don't know how to fix, or we don't know how to help, or we don't know how to unravel. We don't know how to give them the resources to solve the problem. And so we feel powerless. And I will tell you, absolutely, when you're powerless, anger is a massive go-to to just to access additional energy within yourself. And
Mm.
so it's kind of like, what other resource can you use that's even more powerful than anger?
What I wouldn't know because I feel like not only does it's like anger gives us a permission to let it go. To like I always tell people anger, first of all, anger is a second emotion. Like I always feel there's something underneath the anger
Yeah.
that's created it. And anger is almost like the conduit of releasing
Or
what's
taking charge.
right.
It's kind of, because when you feel powerless, whether you're conscious of it or not, you're kind of putting yourself in a victim mode. And
Mm,
when you move into anger, now you are you're poised to be the victor. And anger means, I want to win this battle right here, right now.
right.
And oftentimes, when we have these emotional run ins with our kids, it feels like a battle, and like, I have to win this one.
Mhm.
So I'm going to go to that emotional resource that's going to help me do that. But there's an interesting thing, because and I don't know, this is a lesson that's hard to learn, and I've been learning it for such a long time, and I will not say that I've mastered it. But there is something more powerful than anger, and it
Uh,
is. I'm going to throw this out, and people are going to say, "What the heck?" And it's actually unconditional love.
I said love. That's why I said love.
But it's unconditional love.
Unconditional. There's no rules around it.
Exactly. And the fact that the challenge that we have all been raised to make love conditional.
Hmm.
When you're a good girl, when you're a good boy, when you behave, when you do your homework, when you clean your room, then you are worthy of my praise and my attention.
But if you misbehave and you lie, then I'm going to take it away from you.
Exactly.
And then I'm going to come out with anger. Because as soon as you said that, it struck to me because I was like, that's exactly why I went to anger because I wanted to overpower. So she find like, okay, she will listen to me now.
Yeah.
And I had to just ask myself when you were saying that, I'm like, that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to get the power back,
Exactly.
you know, and now I'm thinking about it, even like with my husband, when do we get upset? When do I get upset? Or when does he get upset? When we feel powerless in the relationship, when we feel that we're losing or we have no control, and then the anger comes up, and that was a whole new meaning. Like I just had like a breakthrough. Thank you. Because I just realized like, oh my gosh, that's exactly what happens. And you and I know about the whole crazy eight behavior
Yeah,
patterns that a lot of us get into. And it's almost like we get to that point where, okay, I got to get the power back because crying about it's not
exactly.
helping, talking to you is not helping. So, by God, I'm going to get the power back. So, I'm going to go to anger and I'm going to bring it back. And then you're going to listen to me and I'm going to feel happy. I'm
Yeah,
gonna feel like we're good now and everything's
because
going to be
I
good.
have the
And start
power.
again.
And somehow or other, when we're in anger, we feel like there has to be a punishment,
Yes.
attached to our victory.
Hmm.
And, so we make up, whatever it's gonna be. Okay, you get no TV tonight, or, no phone privileges, or, there's, no video games tonight, or, you're not gonna get to do that sleepover next weekend. So we continue to exert that power, trying to gain control.
Right.
And
So I just want to say one of the listeners just said it's hard to give unconditional love because of the conditions we place on relationships, emotional response to not having control.
I love that because, you said something about, we wanna raise children that don't have to heal from their childhood. Well, the real challenge is that most of us adults are still trying to heal from our childhood,
Yep,
and we're reacting to our children from those wounds and
100%.
those hurts. So, in order to raise children who don't have to heal from their childhood, we need to heal adults from their childhood wounds. And it's an interesting partnership
Mm,
because, most of our outrage and reactiveness comes from our own wounds of, not feeling secure, or not feeling enough, or not feeling worthy. And somehow or other, we project those expectations onto our children
yes. Yes.
because they have been so deeply etched into our own behavior patterns that we don't know how to separate from them. And so it is, God, it is a process. But first of all, we have to learn about what are the rules that we have set up, or that are you know ingrained in us,
Mm.
that we're reacting to, and what if we change those rules in a way that is healthier for us and for our children?
I love this. And I will say that, in I created a 6-week video program called Crack the Code to Parenting. And week 2 is all about letting go of your baggage because I have seen firsthand when I raised my first 2 boys, because they're 29 and 24 now, I raised them through no self-worth, no self-love, no self-esteem. So what did I imply onto them? What do I see now? I see patterns of that too. And I don't beat myself up over it. I give myself grace because I did the best that I could with what I knew then. But now I
Right.
do better. And, you know, and I see the difference because even with my daughter, regardless of the challenges that we have and that I'm learning and she's learning and we're learning each other, and I've learned a whole new set of stuff today from you. Thank you, Deb. And but she still has self-worth, and I'm so proud of her that we're able to install that in her. And it was evident when I was gone and I said, how did picture day go? How'd your hair go? Because we had my husband's best friend staying with her, and she's like, well, I just did my hair and I kind of put it behind my ears so my natural beauty could show in the camera, mom. And it was such an innocent, authentic comment. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's my own daughter talking to me. Like what I would have felt, what I would have paid to feel that way when I was her age.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, like, I would never have said those words ever.
Mhm.
I wouldn't even know even how to pretend to know what that felt like to say it at 10 years old.
You know, it's so fascinating to look at expectations. And, this, obviously is a slight departure from parenting, but I actually had a client session today, not 2 hours ago, about expectations, and it was from a gentleman who, runs an insurance agency, and he was talking about being disappointed with certain members of his staff, and that he was and, I've worked with this particular, couple for a while now, so we're very used to exploring patterns of reaction, and so he was talking about frustration and judgment and, not like, I feel like some of these people aren't worth my time,
Mm,
and, he said, "What do I do with that?" And I said, quite honestly, I said, "What you're really struggling is patterns of expectation and
mm,
unmet expectation, and how you react to that." And and I'm gonna share something with you because I found it extremely profound in the working through this particular session. And, when we're communicating with this emotional construct of expectation and unmet expectation, and, what was the uh, and self-expectation, and so I wanna make this point very clear to our listeners. Self-expectation, because what is it that you expect of yourself, and what are you disappointed with in terms of what you expect that you haven't fulfilled? Because that is probably the foundation of your frustration. That this is what I expect of myself. I expect myself to perform at this level all the time. I expect myself to behave this way, to produce this result, etc. And so in the conversation, I was asking him, okay, what happens if you don't fulfill those expectations? And the whole thing of self-expectation, the upside of it was intended for him to fulfill the expectations of his parents and his teachers and, the people who, nurtured him. And then I said, "What would it mean if you didn't fulfill their expectations?" And what came up was it meant that I wouldn't be worthy or deserving of their time or their effort. And I said, "So what's the downside of this self-expectation?" And, what came up was that there will never be enough performance. There will never be enough achievement. There will never be enough success to feel worthy and deserving of that love and attention. And so and I'm sharing this because underneath all of that, for most of us, is the same driver,
yeah.
that if we don't deliver to the people who have such high expectations of us, that we are not worthy of their love and attention and time and nurturing and caring. And so I asked, and, you're familiar with my work. So, in the process, I asked, what emotional resource would you need to call upon in order to know that you're worthy and deserving?
Wow.
What would you have to call upon? And in this particular case, his answer was unwavering faith. And that, and I thought, "Wow, that's pretty deep for, a response," but, uh and what happened when we were able to access unwavering faith, and for him to actually draw that into his nervous system and experience it, the the shift was so powerful and so emotional and, almost, uh, like such a transformative shift that he sobbed and sobbed and sobbed because of the difference in how he felt. And
Mm,
I said, "So when unwavering faith is present, what happens to expectation?" And his answer was, "There is none.
right.
There's no agenda."
Deb, just hearing the story brings up a great point, though, because you kind of said it when you're giving the explanation of, having when people that you love have expectations and you can't meet them, then you can't get their love. Basically, you're going to miss out on
Mhm.
their love if you don't meet their expectation. And I feel that that's what a lot of us parents have done. I know that I used to do that to my older kids, and apparently I did it to my younger ones. I didn't even know I was doing it, but intentionally with my older ones, like, these are the expectations. If you want, and I didn't look at it as taking love away. But then when you talk about the unconditional love, you're right. If you do what I say, I'm going to love you. I'm going to give you whatever you want. Yes, yes, yes. The minute you don't meet my expectations, no, 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 you may not give me your phone,
Right.
whatever. And so we are training our kids to be like this gentleman. So when they grow up, it's going to be the same meaning of, I didn't reach the expectation of the people who are supposed to love me unconditionally. So that means that I'm not even going to get your unconditional love because I had
Exactly.
to earn it.
Exactly, honey, because and what we are teaching, whether we recognize it or not, is we're teaching that love is and acceptance is conditional. And, so much of, the movement of particularly young people and, you know, just identifying themselves as not traditional, stereotypes as, whether they're trans or bi or he or she or they or whatever, that they are demanding unconditional acceptance. And they're actually kind of leading the way in creating that in this generation. And although there are, that's only a small piece of the population, but that in itself is a breakthrough in unconditional acceptance. And yet you look at social media and you look at the influence that is exerted on these young people,
Mm,
and you realize that social media is defining the expectations and the
exactly.
rules and the boundaries, and that it's more pressure than it's ever been because now not only do your parents get to determine, whether you're loved and accepted and whether you behave and what you're going to get if you do behave. There's a whole milieu of influences out there that are telling you whether or not you are acceptable.
Right. Right. And so it's almost like beyond the parents wanting the power, social media. It's
Oh
like,
my
where
god.
are we putting the power?
I
It's
know.
everywhere but where it needs to be. But so I have a question, because
Yes.
what about those that have kids that are, like, say, have been drug addicted to drugs, and you say, you know what, I'm going to do the tough love, because most parents will enable it first because they love their kid, they're going to save them, they're going to get them through this. And every time they go through that disappointment and they get to that point where, like, you know what, you can't come back. Like, I have to draw the line. And then the parents feel guilt, right?
Yeah.
Because now their
Oh,
kid's on that side of the street, and it's your child. Like, how do you so when we're talking about these reactive behaviors, how do you help someone that is going through challenges like that with older kids, older teenagers, young adults?
yes.
And it doesn't have to be drug addiction. It can be anything where that
Yes.
parent guilt shows up.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, it doesn't matter it's if you feel like your children are straying and moving in a direction that's unhealthy for them. My gosh, there's a whole sector of society that is there to help those people find their way back because it is such a huge issue. And I think part of it is really trying to understand what is what is it that these kids are really looking for?
Mm,
Any form of addiction is an escape of some kind.
right.
It's an escape, and it's a desire to stop the pain,
Pain,
whatever it is.
100%.
Whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's food, whether it's cutting,
I was gonna say that, self-harm.
it's 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 an attempt to stop the pain. And the thing that is so hard for us to figure out is what's the source of the pain,
Mhm.
and how do we help them, um, remove the source of that pain. And oftentimes, the source of that pain is our own expectations, and
Ooh,
and the feeling that there'll never be enough
mm,
to
and
be.
I can
And
see that. I can see that even with my own brother. Like, my brother was an addict. He passed away last year, and it was my mom who mourned him because, like, they had no relationship. There was a
mm,
lot of hatred and whatnot, but I don't think it was hatred. I think he was so hurt that my mom was not enabling it. My mom wasn't saying, "Oh, come stay at our house even though you're high." She put her foot down and said, "Absolutely not. I love you
mhm,
too much to let you stay here and keep doing this. Like, if you want to get help, I'll pay for your help. If you want, but
yeah,
to keep coming in and using my house as a revolving door." And so now my mom looks back because she can't make amends now. And there's
yeah.
even more guilt for her. And I've tried to help her understand that it's not that he hated you. He was so hurt and he did not know how to express it.
And, honey, I think it's very hard for us to ever understand the depth of anyone else's pain. And I don't care if they're your own kids, I don't care if that's your partner,
Right.
your siblings, that we don't know all of the, emotional traumas. And sometimes those emotional traumas could be something as slight as not getting picked for the team at school,
Oh,
or
yeah.
not being invited to the
That's okay.
popular kid's birthday party. We're such, um, vulnerable creatures when it comes to emotions, and some of us develop tough skins and some of us don't. And, this is, my God, I wish I could answer this question in one conversation, but I don't feel that I have enough insight on that. But I do know that unconditional love is more powerful than anything else. And from that space, I think we can be more open to discovering what the real pain is, even if we're part of it. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, no, I agree with you. I was just sitting here thinking also, going back to everything, like everything just kind of comes under expectation. Like, I was even thinking about, you know, so one of the things that I do with parents is teaching them to create that open, safe, and trusting space between them and their children. So their children can come to them and say, "Look, I wasn't invited to the popular kids party, and this is how I'm feeling about it," and not feel the parents are going to say, "Well, why not? Should I call their parents?" Like, "Well, what's wrong?" Like, and make other, because the parents now have a story about it too, because they have a different expectation.
Oh, sure, and the parents feel rejected as well,
Right.
and so then there's an emotional thing on that side, so then there's
But even disappointment, like,
a
where does, like, I was thinking that if kids, and this is the biggest thing that I get from my clients, because I coach many kids during the week. And here's the underlining feeling. They're afraid to disappoint their parents.
Mhm,
So I said, "Well, did you share this with your parents?" They're like, "No." I said, "You do not want your parents to know?" They're like, "Nope." And I said, "Well, what would it mean if you told your parents this? Like, what would be the outcome?" "Oh, no, 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 no. I wouldn't want to disappoint them." Like, that's the last thing a child wants to do, is disappoint their parents.
sure. And half the time, if they feel like they're rejected outside of the home, they don't want their parents to know, because the parents will take that very personally, and the kids know it.
Right.
It's kinda like, "Well, what do you mean my kids aren't good enough?"
Right.
And if my kids aren't good enough, then somehow or other, that's a reflection on me. So, when your child is rejected, the the real emotion behind that is, feeling rejected yourself,
Right.
that Mhm.
So, and I want to read this comment from somebody, but real quick, it was interesting that you said that because I remember my 29-year-old when he was younger in his like early teens and he was playing soccer. I saw like his whole soccer team was over there and he was like by me. And I'm like, don't you want to go sit with your friends? And he's like, no. He's like, Mom, stop looking over there. Mom, stop. And I started hurting because I felt very rejected, ostracized when I was growing up. I went through the feelings that I had again for him,
Yeah.
and it was
Mhm.
more intense.
Mhm.
I'm like, oh gosh, did I
Yeah.
rub off on him? Like, did I give him the
Well,
tree of not feeling enough? And like, oh my gosh, when there was so much sadness, I felt that. I like to this day, I still remember it. Like it really affects me because I was like, oh my
a
gosh,
and then we feel like a complete failure as a parent because 'cause we're supposed to protect our child from that, you know? So, you know you went through that pain, you know you had those wounds, and there was no one there to buffer you or protect you from it. So you think, oh, I'm going to, be able to do that for my children. And you realize that most of the time you don't even know what they're going through.
right, right.
And
So let's
so,
let's take this question. It says, Deb, I will have a self-expectation conversation with my son on Saturday, who is in rehab for the 12th time at 23 years old. How might I approach that?
I guess my first thought is that the conversation I would want to have is, what do you really want for your life? It's not like a conversation about what's wrong and what has to be changed and what's not working and why are you back in this place again and again and again. And maybe it's really getting curious and asking different questions. And if it's what do you really want for your life and how can we begin to put you on that path? How
Oh,
can
that's a great question.
Because it's not like, "I can't do it for you." That's the reality, you can't. As
Mhm.
much as you want to, you really think you can do it for them, but you can't. But you can do it with them.
I love that. And I would might add also is, you know, remember like this conversation that Deb and I'm having is that let go of any expectation.
Yeah,
You know,
seriously,
like it's and I think we all do that. Just taking that for example, when I had to face something with one of my children, when I went to where he was, I had to let go of any expectation. It wasn't
Mhm,
that, and he was shocked. He's like, what happened to my mom? Because I wasn't blaming, I wasn't shaming like I used to. It was like,
mhm.
what did you learn from this? And what can I do to support you to move through this so it
Yeah,
doesn't happen again? It was just a curiosity question
yeah.
with no expectations.
And, it's an interesting thing, as I'm thinking about this question. The question that I think is not only what do you really want for your life, but the question is what are you afraid of?
That's what I was spot on.
Yeah, what are
Spot
you afraid of? And how can we work through that together?
on. Right.
Um, 'Cause I think oftentimes, not just children, not just young adults, but oftentimes in any struggle, we have a tendency to feel like we're in it by ourselves.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Deb, we just have a couple more minutes. And you know, you have a fabulous book called Freedom Point that really talks about like the emotions and, kind of
Mhm,
your process that you have created so people can get in touch with that. If anyone wanted to get in touch with you, maybe to do one of these sessions because maybe they are burdened with a lot of emotions, they just really need to work through them and find that freedom.
mhm.
How would they be able to find you?
Well, personally, just to reach out to me at deb@successmatrix.com. I'd be happy to, have a chat with anyone who has questions or, uh, you know, try and, give them some resources and insights that may be of value. So Deb at successmatrix.com. And if you're curious about the book, it's available on Amazon. So
I was just going to say, get the book, guys. Get her book. If you really want to get in tune with emotions, you really want to understand the emotions. To me, this is emotional intelligence, actually. Read Deb's book. It's amazing. Go get it. She is amazing. If you guys haven't already figured out, Deb, this has been a pleasure to have you. I'm sure we could have gone on for another hour. You're just a chest of information. I just, a gold mine. So I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you just showing up for our audience and really helping them through that. It's just been an absolute pleasure.
Well, it has been my pleasure, and I'm so excited about what you're doing. So keep doing the work, hon.
Thank you. Thank you so much. If you're finding value in our conversation here on our show, please join our Redefine Parenting group on Facebook for even more tips and conversation. Do someone you know a favor and share my group with them as well so they too can hear what they need to in order for them to feel supported in their parenting journey. This show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out www.spanglishworld.ca for all your news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it.